Linda's announcement struck me like a sharp slap from across the room, and I could feel the atmosphere shift the instant the applause began, swelling around Evan, her 24-year-old son who had barely been there long enough to learn where the break room was. I kept my smile steady, my posture composed, my hands resting calmly on the table, because shock has a way of sharpening everything, especially the truths you've been forcing yourself not to acknowledge. What none of them understood in that moment was simple and devastating. They had just pushed aside the one person quietly holding their entire operation together, and once I stepped away, nothing would ever work the same again. If you've ever been passed over for someone unqualified, leave a comment and subscribe to hear more stories like this. When people talk about loyalty at work, they usually mean punctuality, meeting deadlines, doing what's asked without complaint. For me, loyalty became something heavier, something that wrapped itself around my life so gradually I didn't notice until it was too late. After my divorce, Redwood Equipment Logistics became the one constant I could rely on. It was the place where I rebuilt myself piece by piece, without questions, without sympathy, without anyone looking too closely. The Pacific Northwest helped in its own quiet way. Gray mornings that dulled the sharpest edges, the clean scent of rain, the low mechanical hum of trucks rolling out before dawn. My daughter Ava was 16 then, old enough to recognize how tired I was, but kind enough not to say it outright. Every other weekend, she stayed with me, sitting at the kitchen counter with her homework spread out while I balanced route adjustments and supplier reports. She pretended it was normal. Sometimes she'd reach out, close my laptop with one finger and say, "Mom, you need a break." Maybe she was right. But breaks didn't cover braces, school trips, or the mortgage my ex had abandoned without a second thought. So I worked, and worked. 7 years of missed barbecues, canceled dinners, and late-night emergencies shaped me into the person everyone at Redwood depended on. Routing failures, weather shutdowns, supplier catastrophes. My phone rang every time. I never complained. I wore my reliability like armor. People said I stayed calm under pressure, but the truth was, I never had the option to fall apart. The promotion Linda hinted at kept me moving forward. Director of Regional Operations. It wasn't just a title, it was validation. Proof that every sacrifice mattered. Linda had smiled that thin, professional smile and said, "You're next in line, Tessa. Just keep doing what you're doing." And I believed her. Or maybe I needed to believe her. The truth was, I built half the systems Evan would later pretend to understand. I mapped every distribution corridor between Tacoma and Spokane. I renegotiated contracts that saved millions. I redesigned our emergency response model after the Cascadia storms nearly shut us down entirely. People joked that if I ever left, Redwood would collapse within a week. I laughed along, but some part of me wondered if it was actually true. Linda relied on me more than she ever admitted. When driver shortages hit, she called me late at night for projections. When a supplier missed a shipment, she expected me to smooth it over. When the board needed quarterly numbers reframed to mask executive mistakes, she asked for my wording. Every time, I delivered. And maybe that's why I didn't notice how exhausted I'd become. Tired of carrying what no one else wanted to hold. Tired of watching Linda take credit in meetings. Tired of believing that patience and hard work were always rewarded. Patience only works when the people above you have integrity. I didn't know it then, but the people above me had something else entirely. Plans that never included me, no matter how many all-nighters I pulled or disasters I prevented. Still, right up until everything unraveled, I believed the future was finally tilting in my favor. I believed the promotion was mine. I believed loyalty meant something. Right up until the moment it didn't. The morning of the announcement felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that settles in before a storm you don't yet see. I walked into the conference room with my notebook, prepared for what I believed was a formality. Linda had said we were aligning leadership with performance, and performance was something I'd carried on my back for years. The room smelled like burnt coffee mixed with industrial cleaner, that familiar scent every logistics office absorbs into its walls. People buzzed softly, whispering, smiling like they already knew how things would go. A few nodded at me, one person mouthed, "Good luck," and my chest warmed with quiet certainty. Maybe this was it. Maybe the sacrifices were finally about to mean something. Linda stood at the head of the table with her binder, Evan positioned beside her like a display piece. Polished hair, new blazer, shoes that never touched a warehouse floor. He grinned at the room, and I told myself not to overthink it. Linda cleared her throat and launched into her speech about growth, evolution, and Redwood's future. I waited for my name. I waited for acknowledgement of years spent managing crises, renegotiating vendors, expanding regions, rebuilding operations from the ground up. I waited for confirmation of what she'd implied months. Instead, she smiled wider and said, "Please join me in congratulating our new regional operations lead, Evan Grayson." For a moment, my mind refused to cooperate. My hands froze on my notebook. The room filled with applause. Not enthusiastic, just dutiful. Evan stepped forward like he'd won something monumental, waving slightly as if accepting an award. My pulse thundered in my ears. Heat crawled up my neck, but I didn't move. I clapped slowly, mechanically, because anything else would have exposed too much. Linda gestured toward me and said, "I want to give special recognition to Tessa. She's been instrumental in helping Evan understand our operations, a true team player." The words landed harder than the announcement. Helping Evan understand. I'd walked him through one basic routing scenario. He didn't understand geography, weather impact, supplier dependence, or union constraints. Yet there he stood, adjusting his blazer like he'd earned something sacred. When the meeting ended, people lined up to congratulate him. I waited, then stood, moving carefully, feeling Linda's eyes on me, watching for cracks. Evan stopped me with a bright, clueless smile. "Hey, Tessa, I'm going to need your help getting settled. Mom says you're basically the backbone of the department." Basically the backbone. I nodded once. "Congratulations," I said, the word tasting metallic. The next day, the office felt different. I worked through emails, fixed issues, stayed late. That evening, passing Linda's office, I heard her voice through the cracked door. "He'll be fine. He just needs time," a man answered, uneasy. "The board is already asking why we bypassed Tessa." Linda replied coolly, "Tessa is dependable, but she's not leadership material. She's good at the grunt work. And Evan needs this. He needs a win. He'll learn, and Tessa won't fight it. She can't afford to." And that was the moment everything became clear.
The floor felt like it shifted beneath me. Stay in line. So that was the plan all along. Use my competence to prop Evan up, knowing I didn't have the luxury to push back. They'd counted on my silence. They'd counted on my need for stability. They'd counted on me caring too much about holding my life together to risk losing my job. "If anything goes wrong," Linda added, "she'll handle it. She always does. And Evan will get the credit he needs to move upward. Eventually, she'll settle into supporting him permanently." My breath caught, not loud enough to be heard, but loud enough inside me that it felt like something fundamental cracked open permanently. That was my future in her mind, a lifetime of doing the work while Evan held the title, a lifetime of being the safety net for a man who didn't know the difference between a routing alert and a supplier escalation. Their voices dropped into quieter tones, but I'd already heard everything that mattered. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. They didn't even see me. I was a tool, useful, predictable, and safely invisible. And I stepped back from the doorway slowly, careful not to make a sound, each step down the hall feeling heavier and more deliberate as the truth settled into me like stone. They believed I wouldn't fight because my life was complicated, my responsibilities too heavy, because I couldn't afford to walk away. But as I reached my desk and shut down my computer, a strange calm moved through me, cold, certain, undeniable. They had underestimated the wrong person, and they were about to learn what that mistake would cost. Walking into the office that Friday morning felt strangely liberating, like I'd already stepped outside the version of myself they thought they controlled. I didn't rush or scramble to fix whatever fires Evan had likely started. I hung my coat, made coffee, and sat at my desk with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The resignation letter waited on my screen, every word sharp and steady, written only when the fog finally lifts. I printed it, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a plain envelope. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even. They expected humiliation to make me desperate, but instead it made me fearless. Around 4:30 p.m., as people packed up for the weekend, I walked toward Linda's office. Evan stood in the hallway fumbling with reports he clearly didn't understand, giving me a nervous smile that sparked an unexpected flicker of pity. He wasn't cruel, just unprepared, elevated into a role he didn't know how to carry. Linda stepped out as I approached, her expression already tight with the stress she tried to hide. "Tessa, do you have a minute?" she asked, smoothing her blazer. "I do," I replied, handing her the envelope before she could continue. She blinked. "What's this?" "My 2 weeks' notice." The air went still. Evan froze. Linda tore it open, scanned the page, and color rose in her cheeks. "You can't be serious." "I am." She stared, waiting for me to break, but silence unsettled her more than anger. "You're leaving because Evan got the promotion? I'm leaving because it's time." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Think this through. You have a daughter, a mortgage, responsibilities." There it was, the leverage she thought she owned. "I'll manage," I said, and her frustration sharpened. "This will make you look impulsive. No company wants someone who abandons their post." The words didn't sting anymore. "That's your opinion." "It's reality," she snapped, then softened. "We value you, but Evan represents where Redwood is going. Innovation, new leadership. You still have a place here." The place she always intended, the workhorse behind her son. "I appreciate the clarity," I said, and for the first time she faltered. "Take the weekend," she insisted. "Come back Monday and we'll forget this." "No," I said gently, "this is the right decision." Evan finally spoke. "Mom, she handles everything. What are we supposed to do if she leaves?" The truth landed hard. Linda tried to shut him up, but it was too late. "You'll figure it out," I said, "just like I will." "You're making a mistake," she said. "Maybe," I replied, "but it's mine to make." I turned and walked away, the lights buzzing overhead, phones ringing in distant cubicles, the building feeling lighter, as if it already knew I was free, and for the first time in years, so did I. Monday morning carried that kind of tension you feel before you even step inside the building. The carpool lot was fuller than usual, people walking faster, shoulders tight, conversations clipped. I knew before I even reached my desk that something had already gone wrong. Evan's office door was wide open, and he sat hunched over his computer with 3 spreadsheets pulled up, his face drained of color, looking like someone trying to read a language he'd never seen before. He startled when he noticed me walking by. "Tessa, thank God! Do you have a second?" His voice cracked. I paused, not because I planned to save him, but because I needed to see how deep the damage went. "What's going on?" He swallowed hard and pointed to his screen. "Northern Timber Consortium is threatening to pull their contract, something about shipment delays and an escalation protocol. I can't figure out what they're talking about." That account alone was worth nearly $4 million a year. I leaned in just enough to read the email. The issue was obvious, so obvious anyone with field experience would have caught instantly. A supplier in Tacoma had updated their lead times due to equipment failure, and the automated routing adjustment Evan approved on Friday didn't account for the shift. His decision had pushed all deliveries back 3 days. For Northern Timber, 3 days meant a full production halt. "Did you review the routing exceptions before approving the shift?" I asked, his eyes widened. "There were exceptions? The system didn't warn me." "It did," I said quietly. You just didn't know where to look. Panic rippled across his face like a fast-moving shadow. Can you just fix it, please? I wasn't obligated to, not anymore, but the fallout from this would hit every warehouse, every driver, every customer relying on us. And truthfully, I wasn't ready to watch the region I'd spent years building collapse in real time. So I sat beside him and walked through the steps: how to reroute urgent deliveries, how to negotiate temporary supply transfers, who to call first, how to frame the apology. He took furious notes, like a student cramming for an exam. 2 hours later, Northern Timber agreed to stay. Barely. By lunchtime, word had already spread. Copper Ridge Metals was complaining about mislabeled manifests. Bend Industrial was threatening penalties because their shipment didn't match the size requirements we'd guaranteed. Every issue pointed back to decisions Evan had made, without understanding the consequences. Linda stormed into the operations bay around 1 p.m., her lipstick sharp, her eyes sharper. "Tessa," she barked into my office. I followed her back, watching the tight set of her shoulders. She shut the door the moment we stepped inside. "Did you tell anyone you're leaving?" "Only you," I said. "Why?" She paced behind her desk, rubbing her temples. "The board has called for a status review on all regional accounts. They're hearing noise about operational failures. And now Northern Timber is demanding explanations." I didn't respond. She wanted a confession, reassurance, something to anchor the chaos swirling around her. "Tessa, be honest with me," she said. "Are you doing something to undermine Evan?" The accusation didn't surprise me.
It was easier to blame me than admit she'd placed her son in a job he couldn't handle. "No," I said calmly, "your son is undermining himself." Her face twitched. "He's overwhelmed. It's his first week." "That's not overwhelm," I said. "That's an inexperience." "Then help him," she snapped. "I'm still here," I reminded her, "but only for 9 more days." Her breath hitched, a small involuntary sound. "You can't leave now, not when everything is on shaky ground." There it was, the truth she'd been trying to avoid. She needed me. She always had, and losing me now wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. "You'll manage," I said, echoing the same words she'd thrown at me days earlier. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, scream, or beg, but she did none of those things. Instead, she slumped into her chair, as if the weight of the entire region had been placed on her spine. The rest of the week unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. Every morning brought a new crisis: wrong inventory counts, delayed dispatches, missing confirmations, furious customers demanding answers Evan didn't have. I trained him when the mistakes threatened the stability of the whole operation, but I didn't shield him. I didn't stand between him and the consequences Linda had orchestrated. By Friday, he looked 10 years older. Linda looked worse. Their perfect plan was collapsing from the inside, and all I had to do was keep doing my job quietly, professionally, without saving them from themselves. That's when I realized something unexpected. I didn't need revenge. They were already manufacturing their own. I was 3 weeks into my new job when the first call came from an old warehouse supervisor at Redwood. His voice carried a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. "Tessa, you should see what's happening over here." I stepped into an empty conference room and closed the door. He didn't wait before spilling everything. Northern Timber had finally pulled their secondary contract after Evan mishandled another routing chain. Copper Ridge imposed financial penalties so steep accounting couldn't hide them. Bend Industrial bypassed Evan entirely and sent a furious email directly to the board. Within days, 3 more clients hinted they were exploring competitors, including the one I now worked for. Word traveled fast in logistics, faster than trucks on the interstate. People trusted competence, and they remembered who protected them when things went wrong. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile, but a quiet understanding settled in me. Consequences don't vanish just because someone in power ignores them. They wait, they accumulate, they land exactly where they belong. A week later, my new manager slid a business magazine across my desk. "Thought you'd want to see this?" he said.
The cover headline read, "Redwood Region Collapses Amid Nepotism and Mismanagement." My chest tightened as I skimmed the article. It detailed a cascade of operational failures, customer defections, and internal complaints. It mentioned anonymous employees describing unqualified leadership and a critical loss of institutional knowledge. They didn't name me, but every line made it obvious. Evan had resigned after a challenging period of transition. Challenging was a generous word. Linda had been relieved of her duties following a board-led investigation. The article referenced irregularities in the promotion process and potential ethical breaches in corporate language. That meant they had uncovered everything I'd overheard behind her half-closed door. Toward the bottom of the article was a line that made me pause. Several former Redwood clients have reached out to Silver Coast Logistics, specifically requesting to work with their new regional director of routing strategy, citing trust and proven expertise. My name wasn't printed, but it didn't need to be. My phone buzzed with 2 new client inquiry emails before I even finished reading. Later that afternoon, during my break, I sat in my car staring at the rain streaking across the windshield. Part of me expected to feel vindication, triumph, something fiery and explosive, but what I felt instead was something quieter, relief. Relief that the truth had surfaced without me lifting a finger. Relief that the weight I'd carried for years had finally rolled back onto the shoulders that created it. A few days later, I ran into a former coworker who told me, "Linda blamed me for everything. She says you orchestrated her downfall," he whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said, "she orchestrated her own. I just stopped shielding her from it." And as I walked back to my office, a simple, undeniable truth settled into place. Walking away had done more damage than any confrontation ever could. They built their empire on assumptions. I simply removed myself from being one of them. Months later, during a supply chain conference in Portland, I spotted Evan sitting alone near the back of the hall, a badge from a small startup clipped to his jacket. He looked up when he recognized me, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he offered a quiet, sincere, "I'm sorry." I nodded. There was nothing left to dissect. He'd been placed in a role he wasn't ready for, pushed forward by someone who couldn't see the damage he was doing. I wished him well and meant it. When I stepped outside afterwards, the air felt clearer than it had in years. My phone buzzed with another new client request, another door opening because I finally walked away from the ones that kept me small. Revenge hadn't been the point, growth was, and the life I rebuilt didn't come from fighting them, it came from choosing myself. Looking back, what stays with me isn't the betrayal itself, but the quiet strength I didn't know I had until I stopped carrying everyone else's weight. For years, I thought being indispensable would protect me. I thought showing up early, staying late, and keeping the entire operation stitched together would prove my value. But arrogant leadership never sees the people holding the structure in place. They only see the parts they think they can rearrange. Losing that promotion forced me to realize something uncomfortable. I had built an entire life around being needed, but not around being valued, and that difference cost me more than I admitted at the time. It cost me weekends with my daughter, restful nights, a sense of dignity I didn't even know had slowly drained away. Still, the moment I stepped back, everything they assumed I would hold together collapsed. Not because I sabotaged them, but because the foundation was always mine. Seeing that unfold taught me a truth I wish I'd learned earlier. Competence is power, but it becomes real only when you stop letting others exploit it. If I were sitting with a friend right now, here's what I'd tell her. Document everything, not out of paranoia, but out of self-respect. Don't confuse loyalty with letting people walk over you, and never believe you're trapped just because someone in authority tells you that you are. Leaving doesn't always burn bridges. Sometimes it simply reveals which ones were never stable. How to get started today? Write down the work you handle that no one else sees. Set one boundary this week and honor it without apology. Notice who respects your limits and who only respects your output. Update your resume even if you don't plan to leave. Ask yourself where your value is recognized, not just used.